Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the Antichess tutorial series that I'm running on this channel. I once again have not made a video in a very long time, mostly due to exams and studying for that and such. But my goal is as most of you know, my goal is to put out videos as often as I can. So if sometimes the videos are coming slowly, it just means I'm pretty busy because I love doing this and I think it's such a cool idea to do, and I get a lot of support from you guys. And so I'm gonna keep continuing to do my best to get these series out. In particular, this um, uh, series following my Anti-Chess World Championship 2020. And I'm planning to start another series in the future, which is a road to AGM to my title. So I would just go through my norm tournaments and discuss games in there, as well as as soon as I record a video with world champion Pepsi in gaming. I'll have an interview video with him, and hopefully he will also be part of my top 10 anti-chess all-time list video, because I actually have the list created right now, but have not recorded that video yet. But that will be coming soon, and in the meantime, I will share part 2 of my anti-chess tutorials video. This video is mainly aimed, honestly, this video, in my opinion, there are several chapters in here that uh, I didn't really think about too much, and I didn't really learn that much about until I would say strength-wise, I was 2200. But I think there are things that you can think about at any point, whatever point you are in the game. Um, like I think the earlier you start to recognize these ideas and concepts, the better. And it's something that definitely harmed my progression, is I didn't really think of these things. But eventually I came up with these sort of concepts and ideas that have really, I felt, have made me a much stronger anti-chess player. They haven't necessarily improved my rating a ton, but at least my strength and my knowledge of the game, I can definitely feel a difference. And so this video is just mainly focusing on big concepts and ideas that a lot of people sort of overlook in anti-chess sometimes. So the big ideas we'll be going over are space control, development, not necessarily just sacrificing all your pieces, time management, and I'll do a little bit of introduction to queen racing in this video. So anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. We're starting out, this first chapter sort of focuses on space control. And in anti-chess, you think, so if you play standard chess, you normally think, oh, you want to control the center, you want to get your pieces developed. So in anti-chess, if you're trying to give away your pieces, it would seem logical to do the opposite, but that's not true. The games are actually quite similar in concepts and ideas, and you would really want to you still want to develop your pieces, and you still want to control as much space as possible, because it limits your opponent's moves, and you can control your opponent much more that way and force them to make certain moves in your favor. Um, I just have this game. I won't go too much over the opening. By the way, I'm pretty sure. I think it's rather 3 and 4 or 4 and 5 parts of this tutorial series. We'll be going over openings. So I just find at first, you can learn some openings on your own, and you can find out which openings lose by force right off the beginning. And I feel like those are good learning experiences to have, like when you play D3 and lose when your opponent doesn't even lose a second off the clock. Um, I've had that happen to me, and I've also done this to other people, and it's just a good learning experience. It's like, okay, I guess I don't play D3 anymore. But anyways, for those of you who are awaiting an opening tutorial, they will be coming very shortly, and there will be plentiful of studies in this series focusing on openings. But today we're just mainly focusing. I'm just going to go through these moves, and I'm just focusing on space control and development, particularly in this case. So when you look at this position on the board, you think, okay, white's major pieces are in this corner, black's major pieces are in this corner, um, and neither of them are developed very well, but black has a significant advantage here. And it first comes from the move d6. And what does d6 do? So it opens up your bishop on this pawn, obviously. White's going to have to recapture. The problem for white is white rather has to recapture with this rook, which obviously loses because then the rook will have to sweep down here. If you recapture with the knight after g5, you're not doing very well because the knight will have to capture. Not only does your knight have several free captures in a row, but your rook is also now opened up, and so white would be hurting there. The bishop opens up. Obviously, it's lost again. The king will just have to move over and take that. So white in this position has to play king g3. So then after I capture and white recaptures, now there's no sort of force win. Like the bishop is safe, the knight is safe, the rook is safe. However, one thing you'll notice is they're very stuck in this corner, and this king is now pinned to this rook. Or sorry, the rook is pinned to the king. I think I don't know. Um, and so the king can't move from this file. The rook can't move from this file. The knight can't move out, and the bishop can't move out. So I am very slowly but surely limiting the amount of moves that white can make. So and the next move I make here is g5. It's just sort of pushing the king back. If I play g4, king captures, and all of a sudden the rook's opened up for again. So the king has to move back, and now as you'll notice, king cannot move at like any move that the king makes is losing. Any move that the knight makes is losing. Any move that the bishop makes is losing, and any move that the rook makes is losing, which means white has to move these pawns. So I'm limiting the amount that white can do. So the next move I play is a5, and this is okay. That's confusing, but as you'll see after I do play a5, the amount of space control I have compared to white. White has like this little bit of space control, um, and sort of controls a little bit here with the pawns, um, but white's extremely lacking in space control compared to black or me in this position. It just shows that because white is stuck in a corner, as you'll see in the next couple moves, I'll have several good moves. Like right now, I can move my king anywhere. I can move my knight anywhere. I can develop my rook to. I can move my rook up the board. My pawns are all in nice positions. Um, and as you'll see in a second, it actually ends up working very well. So a5 not only is it to grab more space, but it's to prevent the space control of white. White can't move the pawn continuously up the board now. So white plays d4, just trying to grab space. But I go king e7, just bringing my king into the game. Maybe I can get my king into the action doing stuff. White plays d5. But the problem with this is there's no pawn blocking this bishop from ever opening up, as well as this pawn can't move any further, and maybe I can set up some captures here if I have to in the future. But anyway, so I played b6, just providing this idea maybe sometime in the future, and we now have c3. And as you see, now white cannot move this pawn, white cannot move the bishop, white cannot move the knight or the rook or the king or this pawn. So white only has two pieces that they can move, and this certainly makes it easier for me because there's only a couple moves that I really have to calculate in this position. So I play a4 here, and this is to stop the advance of this pawn. I wanna, as you'll see in a second, soon white will not have any pieces to move, and in that case, white is in zugzwang because I have much more space control, and white will not be able to move without losing. So after a4, we have a3. Um, and so now white only has one piece left that can be moved. And so I think in my head, okay, I have a lot of space control. I basically control like this entire part of the board if I really want to. Like okay, not there, but as soon as I develop my knight, my rook can even come to c8, control this file, and there's just so much I can do. I have all this part of the board. Meanwhile, white is stuck, sort of confined to this little corner with a couple of isolated pawns. So I think if I take this pawn, then white will have to move. And so I play b5 because now white has to move this pawn or else white is losing, obviously. But then after I capture this pawn, white doesn't have any pieces to move. White is in zugzwang because of the lack of space. White still only controls this little area of space. Meanwhile, I've pushed my pawns up. My knight can be developed very easily. My rook will have control of this entire rank, this entire file, and because of my space control and my ability to develop over white, I'm going to win this game. So in this case, white played bishop g2, but after knight to c6 and the pawn captures, I play d5, and I think you can probably see some series of captures that may happen, and I ended up winning this game. So that just goes to shows that your development and your space control over your opponent can provide them with less opportunities, which in turn will help you win the game for sure. This next chapter is just showing why development is good. So in this case, I'm playing against another player, but this time I have the white pieces. Takes and again we'll go over openings eventually. We have knight c7 here, and so um, in this case, black has to play knight c7 or knight a8 because of the threat of b4 and then something like queen f3 or bishop b2, which would attack this pawn and the bishop has to recapture. But anyways, black has to undevelop the knight, and I take advantage of this. I always play knight e2 here. Just getting my knight into position is just a way to do it. Black moves the knight again, and I play d4. And after knight captures, queen captures. You'll notice one thing about white side. White cannot move these pieces, or actually any of these pieces. White can move the queen out. White can move the rook to, I don't know, one square over. And black can develop the knight, and then maybe some pawns. But black is significantly behind in development. My queen has lots of threats right in the middle of the board. My knight can come to the center if I ever need it to. The knight has got lots of places it can go. This knight has lots of places it can go. I can develop my knight. This bishop can even develop. My king can develop. My rook is starting to get free here, and I just have so many more options. So black has to play g6 or g5 here. So g6 takes on d7. And after the king takes on d7, I go for knight d2, and I'm sort of bringing my knights to the center of the board to try and gain more space control. Because now when the knights are side by side, there are very few squares out here that are not controlled by the knights, which sort of hinders black's development because can't really move as many pieces further if I can sack all my pieces in a row because I'm controlling so many squares. So black here plays g5, and I'm not a huge fan of g5. I'm thinking if you wanted to play g5, then this position instead of g6, you're probably playing g5 here instead of g6 because you might as well. It's like how certain people will say in standard chess you don't want to move the same piece twice in the opening. Well, I just figure if you're going to play g5 on your next move, you probably should have just played g5 the move before instead of g6. But anyways, g5, and I played g3. It's just sort of stopping the development of this pawn. This pawn can't move to g4 now because after I move my king over, then there will be several threats here. But anyways, b6, and this is an okay move. It sort of hinders the amount of squares the queen can go to, but it does also give this bishop some room because this bishop is pinned to the king right now. Or the king is pinned to the bishop. Oh my gosh. And I now play f4. Not necessarily the strongest move, but after captures, I recapture with the knight, and my knight now has lots of threats. My knight can maybe, in particular, this square right here, I can make black double stack the pawns or move the king out of the way, in which after the queen captures, the king is sort of oddly placed blocking this pawn, which will block the development of this bishop. So I just like knight taking on a4 there. And after queen c7, I play knight d5, just bringing my knight to the center of the board, and now my knight has lots of control and like my knight's developed. This knight's sort of nice. It's a happy knight. It can come to several different squares. My rook is free. This bishop's free. This rook is free after the bishop moves, and my king's got lots of squares. And so my pieces are really nice. Meanwhile, black has two trapped bishops in here. This bishop maybe eventually will be able to move, but this rook still can't move. This knight can't move out here because of g4. So this is just a very much more pleasant position for white, I would say. And after taking on g3, h takes on g3, and now my rook opens up, and there's some threats on this file. And there's not a lot of okay moves for black. It's just a very tricky position to play. In this position, my opponent plays bishop g7, which loses because after rook takes, bishop takes on a1, and rook takes on h8 is the special move, and now the bishop has to come all the way back and capture here. So after knight takes b6 and a takes b6, now this rook is opened up, and I go on to win this game, purely based on the fact that I was able to get my pieces to nice squares. My pieces were much freer and were developed much nicer compared to black's pieces that this bishop is still stuck behind this king right here. This knight still has not moved. and this rook hadn't moved until I opened up this file. White didn't have very many places to go. Anyways, moving on, this is sort of a game that I wanted to show where sacrificing does not necessarily mean good. My chapter in my study, which I will link in my description, is literally named Why Sacrificing Does Not Mean Good. And this opening is an opening that's often played by people between 1200 and I would say 17, 1800. And I before even when you're learning openings, I beg that if you want to become a 2000 or higher player, if you want to become the best player you can be, do not play bishop b7 here. It's really strong against newer players or weaker players, because you lose so many pieces at first. But it just if you play this against anyone, probably 1900 strength, 2000 strength or stronger, like you're probably not going to win anyways, but you have a much better chance by learning stronger openings. So anyways, this opening basically goes after take here, I take your king, which I think we went over in the last video. You want to keep your king in the endgame because it can control lots of squares and it's very maneuverable. Sorry about that. But black gives up the king in this opening. I take here. After queen takes, I recapture with the bishop here. King recapture is probably stronger, but I like this because black often plays a losing move. This is a losing move in this position. And so yeah, so in this position, black does play bishop f3. And after I take, rook recaptures and my queen recaptures, black comes over here, and after these captures, so if you're playing a fast time control or you're playing against a weaker player, you might win because you have less pieces on the board. However, if we look at this, white has a bishop developed, and bishops are generally frowned upon pieces by a lot of players because they're very easily turning into loose cannons, and they very often lose people the game. Probably the most hated piece. So I already have my bishop developed. My knight can come to c3 whenever I want it to. My knight can come to e2 whenever I want it to. I can push all of these pawns. Meanwhile, black's stuck with 2 rooks on the back rank, and this knight can't move out, really. Because it'll just be trouble for black. Anyways, I play c4 here, grabbing more space, also creating threats. Maybe I can push both my pawns up, and then black won't be able to advance on the queen side. And black plays a5, just giving up this pawn and this rook, giving up more material. So knight c3, captures. And now black can't move this knight, and black can't move this rook, and is just stuck with pawns. Meanwhile, I've got all this space, and this is all because black is just sacrificing pieces at this point. So at g6, not much black can do. I play e4, just grabbing more space in the center. Rook g7 and c5, I'm just grabbing more space. I'm developing my pieces more, and I'm keeping a lot of my pieces so then I can use them to my advantage. We have h6, making room for this knight. I play e5, threatening the knight, and the knight, obviously. Oh wait, knight h7. I then develop my other knight, getting one of my final major pieces into the game. And we have knight f6, just giving away the knight. And now black has a rook stuck behind a bunch of pawns, and there's not much black can do at this point. So I develop my king d2. We have h5, king d3, moving my king more into the game, and I have so much control over these squares that black can only move a couple pieces, and black doesn't have a very strong control. So black just moves rook h7 for lack of better move. I play f4, and black gives away another pawn, so now black is only stuck behind 2 pawns. We now have h4. I force black to double up the pawn, so this rook can't really move anywhere now. And I play b4, just advancing my pawns up the board. Not only can this create pressure on the rook, but also if black ever gets out of this, I can always promote faster. We have h3, rook b2, and after h2 we have knight to e4. That's the one. Just grabbing more space in the center here. We now have rook to h8, and I play rook to a2. And as you can probably tell, black gives away the rook here. But the problem is black is very weak now. Black can only move pawns, and generally your major pieces are stronger in the endgame because they can control more squares and they can maneuver stronger. So black can only move these pawns a little bit, and there's very little black can do. So we have h4, c6, I'm just advancing my pawns even more. h3, b5, and we have bishop promotion, which we'll lose after a couple moves. For example, I played b6, which is more advanced intermediate move. So after bishop takes, I take here, and now the bishop has to take the king or the pawn right here. So in overall, you can see as black just sacrificed pieces and gave pieces away, I was able to keep my stronger pieces, keep my development and my space control, and overall take over the game and have control over the game, whereas black just sort of ended up with two pawns and a rook just sort of stuck everywhere and not have a lot of space and control. So yeah, anyways, moving on to chapter 4. This is a game I played against an 1800 player. This chapter is just going over time management. So I'm just playing game 1+0, which is 1 minute on the clock and 0-second increment after every move. So it's just a 1 minute game. And I was playing a player 1800, and at the time of this game I was rated 2239. So definitely not a game I should be losing. I'm 400 points strong, 440 points stronger, basically 450 points stronger. Anyways, we start in the opening, and I play this opening. In this case, this develops both of my bishops, creates threats, maybe my queen eventually. My knights are very nice if I can get them to these squares. And white's not extremely developed. But okay, white develops a piece here, knight h3, and I go for knight h6, just developing my knight. We have knight g5, I capture here, b4. Oh wait, that's g4. b4. And after my bishop captures, we have queen g4, developing the queen. And I capture this queen. And after a3, this wasn't a very strong move for white. This sort of brought it from winning for white to winning for me. Just because I can capture here now, and white will have to recapture, and now the rook has to come down here. But anyways, I capture here, queen f2, rook takes a7, and after I take and the king takes, this is so right now I have 46 seconds on the clock, and my opponent has 43 seconds, so we each use about 15 seconds for the opening. The problem is on this sort of simple move, I don't have very many moves, but I shouldn't be spending that much time on it. I'm not going to find anything crazy. So I should rather move my bishop back, or I should give up the rook because of this pawn. And after I give up the rook, I would just move the bishop back anyway. So two fairly straightforward ideas. But I spent 16 full seconds on this move just to play rook a3. So now I'm down to 30 seconds after that one move. I used more than a quarter of my time for a very, very simple move. And this, basically what I'm trying to say here is if you have a very simple move and a move that you know is not losing, and a move you know that is not terrible, in a fast time control game when you don't have that much time left, you probably just want to play the safer move here, and because I'm not going to find any special moves in this case. So anyways, white captures with the bishop, and I'm down to 30 seconds. I play bishop c8, obviously, and black plays bishop c1, just getting out of this nasty pin. So then I play knight g8, which undevelops my knight. I can't quite remember why I played this. But anyways, white now develops that knight. I play king e7. Oh, that's king d7. That's my bad. I play king e7, which also hinders the development of my knight. We have knight d5, e takes, e4, I take, and we have rook to g1. And I play bishop to g4, rook takes, and I miss a win here. I forget what the winning move is g5. Yes, the winning move here is g5. Wait, hold up. I just want to see it. After here takes and knight. Okay, so it's just sort of complicated. But with 17 seconds left on my clock here, I spent 7 full seconds, so I used up almost half my time on this move. Meanwhile, my opponent still has 30 seconds left. So I should probably just play a move something like g6 here, and just and not spend 7 full seconds on a move that probably isn't going to work out. Like, I think you're starting to understand that the fact that I don't want to spend all my time on something, thinking about something, if I need to get my time back and I need to play safer. But anyways, I played e3 after 7 seconds. So rook takes g7, e takes d2, and after bishop takes on d2, um, actually have a stronger position here, and h6 is the stronger move. But because I only have less than 10 seconds left, and my opponent still has 30, um, I end up blundering, so I play h5. Um, and after rook takes g8, rook takes g8, bishop to g5. My opponent actually blunders here. This is actually a winning position for me now. But I only have 4 seconds left at this point. So even though I remember in an interview with the Unknown Guy Reborn, amazing fast time control player, he said, his wise words once said, you can always get a position back, but you can't get time back. In this case, I only have 4 seconds. My opponent has 26 seconds. Even though I'm in a better position, I'm gonna end up losing. So after takes on g5, we have king g2, and I'm just playing all these moves off pure instinct, no thought process, because I have 4 seconds left. So I'm pre-moving every single move, and I'm predicting them well. So I take on c2, and after here I take on h2, and I have 3 seconds left at this point. Even though I have more pieces and more space, it's not going to matter. So after, oh shoot, after I play king to e8, just because I have to move quickly, we now have king promotion, and although I'm winning here, so I start pushing my pawns. We have king b7, king f7, king b6, king f6, and I'm just moving my king up to support my pawn. But now I only have 1 second left. So king c5, f4, and after king c4, this is I think this is yeah, this is winning for white. It's mate for white. Um, but I just play f3 because now I have zero point 0.4 seconds left, and after king c3, I lost on time. So this chapter was basically just focusing on the fact that that if you have a safe move in a position, it's probably better in certain time controls to play a safer move and not lose your time, to maintain your position and wait for your opponent to blunder. Then like sometimes it's okay to find super strong moves if you know that you have an increment, you can get time back, or you're up on time. But when you're even or low on time in a fast time control game, it's really important to not go for some crazy move all the time unless you're positive there is a crazy move that works out. Anyways, the final chapter here is sort of an introduction to queen racing, which is sort of where each of your queens or a rook, generally called rook racing, but it's still called queen racing, are both taking all the pieces. So in this game, I'm black, and after this opening, I play bishop takes a6. We have queen a4, takes on e2, bishop takes on e2, and after my rook takes, we have b3, and then after rook takes, we have knight to a6, and after bishop takes on a6, I play queen to a8, bishop b7, and I take here, and white goes for rook a8. So now my queen's going to be, oh wait, wait, oh wow. Yes, goes for rook to, did I just screw up my study? I think I just screwed up my study, but that's okay. Oh wait, no, I did not. Okay. Um, did not go for rook to a8. Went for g3 here. That is my apologies. And I take on b3, and now we have rook to a8. Basically, my opponent's rook versus my queen. Generally, queens are stronger because queens can capture more pieces, but in this position, it's just the computer engine knows, and just for whatever reason, this position is fairly even. So I start by I have a choice between a knight and a pawn here. And in this position, I choose the knight, and there's a couple of reasons why. One is major pieces are stronger in the endgame, so I will probably want to take a lot of major pieces first, so that if we resolve in something where both my queen and my opponent's rook are captured, um, hopefully my opponent will have less major pieces. I can control them stronger, as we've seen in the previous couple chapters. Second reason why is because kings are really strong in the endgame, because they're so maneuverable and they can control a lot of squares near them. I want to take my opponent's king, and if I take here, and I have to capture one of these pieces next. My opponent might be able to recapture my queen. I won't be able to get rid of my opponent's king. Um, and thirdly, a general rule of thumb is you don't want to capture third or fourth rank pawns, or for black fifth or sixth rank pawns, because maybe when you resolve, because you take all the first and second rank pieces, your opponent could be left with one third or fourth ranked pawn, which will just be very easy to control and maneuver against. And so I take the knight. My opponent makes the only capture. I take on c1 here, my only capture, and my opponent takes on e7. I take the king, obviously, because the king is very strong. We have rook takes on f7, and now I take on g1, taking another one of my opponent's major pieces. And now we have rook takes on g1, so just recapturing here. And after I play bishop to e7, I think white has a win here. No, okay, white's just much stronger with the move rook takes g7, with a lot of threats, because after oh wait, yeah, after rook takes g7, black's only move is to play h6, because after the two captures here, it's just pretty ugly for black. Black will have to give away the rook, and white will have a rook versus black's bishop, and generally rooks are the strongest piece in the endgame. And so anyways, my opponent misses this, but it's still not losing. It's just stronger for black, because black has two major pieces, and white only has one rook. And so then this position, rook h1 is played for lack of a better move, and I play knight to c8, just eventually bring my knight to protect these squares, so that the rook cannot move to any of these squares. So we have f4. Obviously I can't sack and sack here, because then I'll have to come down and take all those pieces. But I play knight to a7, just sort of saying, okay, you can't move your rook to either of these, any of these three squares, or this square, because obviously I will move my rook down here, and then my knight down here, and so you can't move your rook very much. But f5 is played, and I'm not worried about recapturing this pawn, because obviously once I recapture this pawn, it's just one less piece that white can move. So I play rook to b8. And this also forces white to eventually have to give up the rook, because obviously I can play a rook here and knight here, and once I take white's rook, white is left with only a couple pieces. So after f6, g takes f6, we see rook b1, the only surviving move for now, but it's very strong for black now. We have h5 just pushing the pawns, sorry, h4 that would be, and I play knight to c8. We now have h5 pushing the pawn even more, and I play h6 stopping the push of this pawn. We now have g4, and I play f5, and then after this, I play rook to g1, and after f6 here, I play rook to g8. I want to capture this pawn, so then I can just maneuver my pieces and make this pawn have to capture here. We now have f7, and I play rook to h8. This is oh, I should have the analysis off. This is mate and 4, but I play rook to h8 just because I only have 9 seconds left in this position, but I know I'm much stronger, so I'm not worried. We now have d3, and I play rook to d8, basically saying, okay, if you move this pawn first, then I will move these pieces and then give up my rook. And if you move this pawn first, then I will take here. And then after you move this pawn, I will move up the board and be very happy with my position here. Probably a mate in 5 or something. So white goes for d4, but obviously now c5. And after I give up my rook here, promotion to bishop. And I play knight to a7 after the capture. And this is game over, and this is because out of the queen race, I was left with more major pieces, a general nicer position, and in the end game I took control of space, and I took a lot of control of the board, and eventually maneuvered my opponent's pieces and won the game. So a little bit of a longer video today, and a little bit of some slightly advanced concepts. Obviously, I didn't learn them until very late in sort of my current anti-chess career, but I think they're important concepts and ideas that a lot of people overlook. And they're sort of ideas that I think anyone can take, whether you're 1400 or whether you're 2000. I think these are things that I see in the difference. If you look at someone who's got the strength of 2200 and someone who's got the strength of 2000, that's one thing that I see that really separates them. Is the person who's 2000 knows how to maneuver their pieces well, but they don't often develop their pieces or control space as well as someone who's 2200. The person who's 2200 probably knows their openings very well, and the mid game and end game know that keeping a lot of your pieces and not sacrificing, getting them into places where you can force your opponent to give away their major pieces is going to help you win the game. And so those are just some ideas that I thought about when I was thinking what ideas do a lot of people overlook and what often gets people stuck. And these are sort of the ideas. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. I will come out with as many videos as I can in as little time as possible. So please stay tuned for the following videos for the next couple series. For the next couple series. And I hope you enjoyed. I will see you later, and bye bye.